Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the origins of the Green Beret, those fearless soldiers who struck terror into Hitler's heart. Imagine trudging through the thick, icy mud of a remote forest, with the faint hum of distant artillery echoing through the trees. You're cold, exhausted, but every fiber of your being is focused on the mission. And honestly, you're probably not going to make it through the night. It's that kind of job. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comment side. Love to know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Asterisk, it's 1940. And Europe is in the midst of chaos. The Nazis, with their relentless expansion, have already overrun much of the continent, leaving destruction in their wake. But not all hope is lost. Out of the madness, a new kind of soldier is about to emerge. A soldier who isn't just trained to fight, he's trained to survive against all odds. These were the men who would become the Commandos. The ones who terrified Hitler, who struck where the enemy least expected, and left a trail of destruction that would forever change the way wars were fought. The origins of this elite force start with the British, who saw the need for a specialized unit to carry out daring, high-risk missions. But the idea of such soldiers wasn't entirely new. It drew on the rich history of unconventional warfare, from ancient times to colonial guerrilla tactics. The Brits, however, were about to perfect the formula in a way that would leave the Germans quaking in their boots. In 1940, with the war escalating, the British Army realized they needed soldiers who could strike quickly and silently, blending in with the shadows. They weren't just looking for men who could fight, they needed men who could think on their feet, adapt to any situation, and operate in extreme conditions. This would require a whole new breed of soldier. Historians still argue whether the formation of the Commandos was more about the desperation of the war or the sheer ingenuity of British military leaders. Some say the British were simply scrambling to create a response to the threat, while others believe it was a calculated strategy to bring the war to the Germans in unexpected ways. The first commando units were assembled quickly, with men from all walks of life: soldiers, sailors, and even civilians. They came from places you wouldn't expect: private schools, factories, and docks. What they shared, however, was a burning desire to fight back against the Nazis. They were a mix of the brave, the reckless, and the outright insane. But what united them was the promise of something new, a chance to be part of something that would change the course of history. They began training almost immediately, in the harshest environments Britain could throw at them, from the rugged hills of Scotland to the isolated coastal areas of Wales. Their training was designed to push them beyond their physical and mental limits. They learned to survive on little food, to fight in freezing temperatures, and to navigate the toughest terrains. Their instructors were veterans of previous conflicts, including World War I, who passed down their experience in guerrilla warfare. The goal was simple: make them tough enough to take on Hitler's forces head-on, no matter where or how. But the men weren't just trained to kill. No, they were trained to survive in any environment and adapt their tactics to the situation at hand. They weren't bound by traditional rules of engagement. They were the silent, deadly hands of the military, capable of executing covert missions with efficiency and precision. And it was during this intense period of training that they were first given their iconic Green Berets, symbol of the elite forces they had become. The Green Beret wasn't just a piece of headgear, it was a mark of honor, a sign that you had earned your place among the best. It wasn't easy, it wasn't pretty, and most of all, it wasn't for everyone. Only the strongest, the toughest, and the smartest would be allowed to wear it. It's funny, though, if you'd been there, you might have thought it was all madness. I mean, imagine trying to survive in a frigid Scottish bog with nothing but a knife and your wits. It's no wonder that many of the early commandos didn't make it through the training. But the ones who did, well, they became the stuff of legend. One of the first real tests for the commandos came in 1941 with Operation Chariot, an audacious raid on the French port of Saint-Nazaire. It was one of the most daring raids in military history and set the tone for what the commandos could do. The goal was to destroy the port's dry dock, which was a key asset for the German Navy. The mission was practically suicide, but the commandos, clad in their green berets, carried it out with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The raid was a success, but at a high cost. Many lives were lost, and yet the legend of the commando was solidified. As the war raged on, the commando units grew in number and scope. The British weren't the only ones to take note of their success. Soon, other countries were forming their own special forces units. The United States, for example, would go on to create their own elite group, the Green Berets, named after the very unit that had terrified the Nazis. The Green Beret became a symbol of the unconventional soldier. It stood for the courage to step into the unknown, to face overwhelming odds, and to strike fear into the enemy's heart. And as the years went by, that symbol only grew in significance, representing not just the men who wore it, but the ideals of bravery, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of victory against all odds. You step onto the damp, rocky shore, the sea spray stinging your face as the wind howls, carrying the scent of salt and danger. You've just made landfall, and there's no turning back now. The mission is simple: strike fast, strike hard, and disappear before the enemy even knows what hit them. You're part of the elite. You're one of the men who terrified Hitler, and honestly, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Before we jump in, go ahead and like the video if you're ready to keep going, and subscribe only if what I'm doing here resonates with you. And remember, drop your location and local time in the comments. Always love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, let's dive deeper. The origin of the Green Beret is as much about the men who wore it as it is about the mission itself. In the early days of World War II, the British Army recognized the need for soldiers who could carry out operations behind enemy lines, soldiers who could fight, sabotage, and gather intelligence while being virtually invisible to the enemy. These weren't just your average soldiers. They were hand-picked from a variety of backgrounds, each with a specific set of skills that made them perfect for the job. Historians still debate whether the formation of the commandos was a natural response to the war's escalation, or if it was more about British military leadership finally realizing they needed something new. Some say it was the perfect storm of desperation mixed with ingenuity, while others argue that this was the inevitable evolution of warfare in an age where traditional battles weren't going to cut it anymore. These early commandos came from diverse backgroundsmen who had served in the regular army, sailors who had faced the harsh seas, and even civilians who had nothing more than a burning desire to fight back against the Nazi machine. There was a strange sort of magic in the mix of personalities, talents, and experiences they brought to the table. The training these men went through was not just grueling. It was meant to push them beyond what any human could reasonably endure. But those who made it through emerged stronger, more resourceful, and undeniably fierce. One of the defining features of the early commandos was the rigorous training they underwent. It wasn't just about physical toughness, it was about mental fortitude, adaptability, and the ability to think on the fly when everything around you was crumbling. Training was designed to be as close to real combat as possible. The men had to learn to survive in harsh environments, whether it was the freezing cold of the Scottish Highlands or the humid, mosquito-filled jungles of the Pacific. They had to endure long hours, limited food, and constant threats to their safety, all while being pushed to the brink of exhaustion. The training included close quarters, combat, demolitions, and sabotage. It was a brutal process, with some men dropping out due to injury or the sheer mental strain. But for those who remained, the payoff was worth it. They became experts in the art of stealth, able to infiltrate enemy lines, strike with deadly precision, and vanish without a trace. And perhaps most importantly, they learned to operate without the traditional military structure. These were soldiers who could think independently, make decisions in the moment, and adapt to whatever the situation threw at them. The legend of the Green Beret wasn't just about the uniform, though. It was about the culture of the commandos. They were a brotherhood, bound together by their shared experiences and the unspoken understanding that they were part of something much larger than themselves. They weren't just fighting for victory, they were fighting for survival, for each other, and for the freedom of the world. As the war progressed, their operations became bolder, more daring. One of the most significant early tests came in 1941 with the infamous Operation Chariot. This was a raid on the French port of Saint-Nazaire, which was home to one of the most important dry docks in Nazi-occupied Europe. The goal was to destroy the dock and cripple the German Navy's ability to repair their warships. The mission was almost impossible. There was no way the commandos would be able to get in and out without being noticed. But that didn't stop them. The raid was executed with precision, despite the overwhelming odds. The commandos used everything they had at their disposal, from explosives to sheer determination. The success of the mission sent shockwaves through Nazi command, who couldn't believe how audacious and effective the raid was. But even as they celebrated their success, the commandos knew it had come at a great cost. Many lives were lost, and the raid's legacy was a bittersweet one, filled with both triumph and tragedy. What makes Operation Chariot even more fascinating is the element of surprise. The commandos didn't simply march in and fight their way to their objective. They used the element of deception to their advantage. The operation involved a combination of brute force and clever misdirection, fooling the Germans into thinking they were under attack from an entirely different angle. The combination of intelligence, sabotage, and surprise attack was what made the commandos so effective. Historians still debate the full impact of the raid on the overall course of the war. Some believe it was a game changer, while others argue that its impact was less significant than initially thought. Either way, one thing is clear: the commandos had proven their worth, and the Green Beret was now a symbol of not just elite fighting skills, but of courage and ingenuity. As the war moved forward, the commandos became even more entrenched in the fabric of special forces operations. They were the go-to soldiers for difficult, higher-risk missions that no one else was willing to take on. Their ability to operate in small, specialized teams made them invaluable to the Allied war effort. And as the Allies prepared for the largest amphibious invasion in history, Death, commandos would once again be called upon to perform feats of bravery and skill that would make history. But as much as they were feared by the enemy, the commandos also faced their own set of challenges. The brutal training and harsh missions took their toll, and many of the men struggled with the psychological and emotional effects of their experiences. The legacy of the Green Beret wasn't just one of physical prowess, was about the mental strength it took to endure such a demanding and often dangerous way of life. The sea air is thick with tension as you huddle in the shadows, waiting for the signal. Your heart pounds in your chest, but your mind is sharp, focused. Every muscle is taut, ready to spring into action. This isn't just any a test of everything you've been trained to do. To infiltrate, to sabotage, to disappear without a trace. You're a commando, and this is your time to shine. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to like the video if you're enjoying the right end. Subscribe only if this history of the Green Beret is something you want more of. And hey, share your local time and location in the comments. Evolved into a blueprint for modern special forces, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. The early days of commando training were, in many ways, an experiment. The British military, faced with the urgency of the war, didn't have a fully developed system for training elite soldiers like the Commandos. Instead, they were forced to adapt on the fly, figuring out what worked and discarding what didn't. And while that led to some impressive successes, it also led to some mistakes that cost valuable lives. The early training for commandos was intense, grueling even. The men were subjected to a variety of conditions designed to test their limits. They trained in remote areas, often far from the comforts of civilization. The weather was harsh and the terrain unforgiving. Whether it was climbing mountains in Scotland or surviving in the jungles of Burma, there was no room for weakness. Every commando was expected to perform under extreme stress, be it from physical exertion, hunger, or sleep deprivation. But it wasn't just about physical endurance. The most important skill the commandos were taught was the ability to think under pressure. They learned to make quick decisions, to adapt to unexpected circumstances, and to act with precision. This was something that separated them from the rest of the army. While traditional soldiers were taught to follow orders, the commandos were trained to think for themselves. They were often dropped into hostile environments with little more than a few instructions and the knowledge that they had to survive and complete their mission. One of the most important elements of commando training was the emphasis on stealth. These were soldiers who would operate behind enemy lines in the dead of night, far from support. They had to be able to move without making a sound, to blend into the environment, and to strike quickly without leaving a trace. Stealth was their weapon, and they used it with deadly efficiency. It wasn't long before these trained soldiers were being used for missions that seemed almost impossible. One of the earliest and most famous operations was the attack on the French port of Saint-Nazaire. The goal was simple: destroy the dry dock at the port, which was critical to the German Navy's ability to repair their ships. But getting in and out of Saint-Nazaire wasn't going to be easy. The Germans were on high alert, and the location was heavily defended. The commandos, however, didn't let that stop them. They planned the attack with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. They knew that they had one shot, and they had to make it count. And they did. In the dead of night, a group of commandos infiltrated the port, planting explosives and sabotaging key infrastructure. The raid was a success, but it came at a heavy price. Many of the commandos were killed or captured, and the operation became a symbol of the sacrifices these men were willing to make for their country. Historians still debate the true significance of the Saint-Nazaire raid. Some argue that it was a pivotal moment in the war, showing that the commandos were capable of executing high-stakes missions behind enemy lines. Others believe that its strategic impact was overstated with the damage done to the German Navy being more symbolic than decisive. Regardless, the raid was a testament to the effectiveness of the commando mindset. Take the fight to the enemy, no matter the cost. It was during operations like these that the commandos began to earn their reputation as some of the most feared soldiers on the battlefield. They weren't just regular soldiers, they were ghostly figures who struck from the shadows and disappeared just as quickly. They became the stuff of nightmares for the Axis powers. The fear they instilled wasn't just from their ability to fight, it was from their unpredictability and ruthlessness. Commandos were everywhere and nowhere, and their very existence made the Germans uneasy. While the British Commandos were quickly gaining notoriety, the idea of specialized elite forces spread to other allied nations, most notably the United States. In 1952, the U.S. Army established its own Special Forces unit, the Green Berets, inspired by the British Commandos. The American Green Berets adopted many of the same tactics and methods, including unconventional warfare, guerrilla tactics, and psychological operations. But the U.S. Green Berets would eventually evolve into a unique force in their own right, distinguished by their focus on training foreign armies and assisting in counterinsurgency operations. The legacy of the Green Beret and the Commandos is one that extends far beyond World War II. It's about more than just combat, it's about the ability to adapt to any situation, to think outside the box, and to push past what seems possible. The Green Beret has come to symbolize not just elite fighting ability. They as impactful as the traditional battles, or did they serve more as a morale boost for the Allies? Some scholars point to the immense cost of these operations, while others argue that the true value of the Commandos lies in their ability to disrupt enemy plans and strike fear into the heart of the Axis powers. What's clear, though, is that the Commandos and their Green Berets left a mark on history that can still be felt today. The chill of the early morning air bites at your skin as you prepare for what may be your most dangerous mission yet. You and your fellow commandos stand in the shadows, waiting for the signal. The sea stretches endlessly before you, a vast, unforgiving expanse. The enemy lies ahead, their defenses formidable, but you've been trained for this moment. With a nod, you pull the Green Beret tighter on your head, the weight of history settling onto your shoulders. This isn't just a rat, it's a symbol of everything the Green Berets stand for. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that like button if you're feeling the tension, and subscribe if this deeper dive into the Green Beret legacy sparks something in you. And, of course, drop your location and local time in the comments, curious to see where you all are from. Now, let's press on. That the rise of the Green Beret was not only a triumph of military strategy, but also a tale of transformation in how warfare itself would evolve. As the war intensified, the Commandos grew into a force that transcended traditional methods of fighting. They weren't just soldiers, they were an entirely new breed, designed to meet the unique challenges of a world at war. And central to their success was the creation of the Green Beret, which became the outward symbol of their elite status. The Green Beret wasn't just a military accessory, was a mark of honor, a badge that told the world these men had endured and triumphed through the toughest training imaginable. When it was first introduced, it wasn't about style, it was about function and identity. The British Commandos, who wore the berets with pride, were setting themselves apart from regular infantry. They weren't just part of the military machine. They were a special breed of soldier with a different kind of mission. It wasn't long before the Green Beret became synonymous with elite operations and covert warfare. Wearing the green beret didn't just mean you were trained to fight, it meant you had the skill, the stamina, and the strategic mind to survive behind enemy lines, often in enemy territory, for weeks at a time. And it wasn't just about brute force. The commando was a soldier who could assess a situation, make a plan, and execute it with surgical precision, all while staying unseen and unheard. Historians still debate whether the introduction of the green beret was a defining moment in military fashion or a strategic necessity. Some argue that the beret became a symbol of the personal and collective sacrifices of the commandos, while others suggest that the decision to adopt such a conspicuous piece of headgear may have been a tactical mistake in terms of operational security. Regardless, it became an enduring symbol and emblem that transcended the battlefield and was later adopted by forces around the world. As the war wore on, the commandos continued to prove their worth. They were no longer just a symbol of special operations. They were an integral part of the Allied war machine, performing operations that directly affected the course of the war. Their missions ranged from sabotage and guerrilla warfare to intelligence gathering and psychological operations. But one of their most important roles came in the form of raids and infiltration missions. Take, for example, the Battle of Dieppe in 1942. The raid on the French port was a disaster for the Allies, but it offered valuable lessons. The commandos, along with Canadian forces, were tasked with infiltrating the German defenses and destroying key infrastructure. While the raid ultimately failed due to poor planning and a heavily fortified enemy position, the commandos demonstrated incredible bravery and skill under fire. Despite the heavy casualties, they proved that the principles of surprise, speed, and adaptability, hallmarks of the commando doctrine, could still be effective when executed correctly. In the aftermath of Dieppe, the lessons learned were applied to future operations, and the commandos grew stronger. They were constantly refining their tactics, learning from both their successes and failures. The British command was quick to recognize the importance of special operations, and more resources were funneled into developing even more specialized units. This process culminated in the creation of the British Special Air Service (SAS) in 1941, which followed many of the same principles that had made the commandos so effective. One of the most significant impacts of the commandos' success was their influence on the formation of the U.S. Army's Special Forces. The Americans, impressed by the success of the British units, began to develop their own elite forces, with the Green Beret as their ultimate symbol. The U.S. Green Berets were born out of the lessons learned from the British Commandos, and their training, structure, and operations were deeply influenced by the principles laid down by the British Special Forces. But the legacy of the Green Beret goes beyond mere symbolism. It is a living history, one that continues to evolve and inspire. The Green Beret became a symbol of excellence, honor, and courage, representing a soldier who would go to any length to accomplish their mission. It didn't just represent the past, it was a call to future generations, a reminder that the spirit of the commando was something that could never be extinguished. The Green Beret's significance is not confined to the military realm. It has transcended the battlefield and become an emblem of broader cultural values. The very idea of the Green Beret elite force of soldiers, capable of doing the impossible, has inspired countless individuals, not just in military service, but in all walks of life. The values of adaptability, mental toughness, and determination continue to resonate with people around the world. Historians continue to debate how much influence the Green Berets truly had on modern military tactics, and whether their impact on the war was truly as pivotal as it is often portrayed. Some argue that their true value was in the psychological warfare they conducted, while others point to their effectiveness in disrupting enemy operations and forcing the Germans to divert resources to countering these specialized forces. Regardless, their impact is undeniable, and their legacy continues to influence special forces training today. The sun sets, casting a blood-red glow over the sea as you and your comrades slip quietly into the shadows. The mission ahead is almost impossible, but you're not here to fail. The darkness is your ally, and your training has prepared you for this. Everything is in place. Now, it's just time to strike. Before we get into the heart of the mission, don't forget to like the video if you're enjoying the ride, and subscribe if the stories of the Green Beret captivate you. And hey, share your location and local time in the comments. Always great to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, let's dive in. One of the most iconic missions that cemented the Commandos' reputation as the ghosts of the battlefield was Operation Chariot the Raid on the French port of Saint-Nazaire. This mission wasn't just another raid, it was a statement. It was the birth of a new kind of warfare, one where stealth, speed, and surprise were the ultimate weapons. The goal: destroy the port's dry dock, which was vital to the Germans' ability to repair their heavy warships. If the Germans couldn't fix their ships, they couldn't fight. And if they couldn't fight, the Allies had a chance to turn the tide of the war. But the mission came with a catch. Getting into the heart of Saint-Nazaire wasn't just difficult, it was practically impossible. The Germans had heavily fortified the port, and it was in a place where Allied forces couldn't easily reach. To make matters worse, the Germans were expecting a raid, but the Commandos, led by their unshakable leaders, weren't deterred. They would strike where the enemy least expected, relying on the element of surprise. The plan was set into motion in March 1942. The British, recognizing the crucial importance of this mission, put together an elite team of commandos to carry it out. They would be supported by a number of volunteers, including engineers, explosives experts, and sailors, who were ready to sacrifice everything to ensure the mission's success. The task wasn't just to infiltrate the heavily guarded port, but to destroy its dry dock, which was the only one capable of servicing Germany's largest battleships, including the mighty Tirpitz. What made the operation even more daring was the way the British used the element of surprise to their advantage. They disguised their movements, using a decoy operation to distract the Germans and throw them off the scent of the true objective. The Commandos' mission was to infiltrate the port, plant explosives, and create enough chaos to destroy the dry dock, without leaving a trace of who had carried it out. Historians still argue over the true strategic impact of the Saint-Nazaire raid. Some view it as a vital blow to the German Navy, which had to divert resources to repair the damage. Others believe its significance was more symbolic, showing the Nazis that the British and their allies could strike anywhere, no matter how difficult or impossible it seemed. Either way, the raid sent shockwaves through the Axis powers, demonstrating the deadly capabilities of the British Commandos and leaving behind a lasting legacy of courage and sacrifice. The raid was carried out with precision and ruthless determination, but the cost was high. Many of the men who participated were killed or captured. The operation ended in a bloody confrontation, but the destruction of the dry dock was undeniable. The mission achieved its objectives, even though it came at a price. Many commandos died during the raid, and those who survived would be forever marked by the experience. What makes Operation Chariot so remarkable is the way it encapsulates the essence of the Green Beret. These men weren't just soldiers, They were warriors of a different breed. They didn't rely on brute force or overwhelming numbers. They relied on strategy, stealth, and a relentless drive to complete their mission, no matter the cost. And they did so knowing full well that they might not make it out alive. The operation is a prime example of the kind of unconventional warfare that the Commandos mastered. The raid wasn't just about military tactics, it was about using every resource available to outwit and outmaneuver the enemy. The success of Saint Nazaire didn't just demonstrate the Commandos' fighting prowess, showed the power of intelligence and ingenuity in warfare. Despite the success of the raid, the loss of life was staggering. Of the 600 men who participated, fewer than 200 returned. The rest were either killed in action or taken as prisoners of war. The raid was a bitter reminder of the price of war, but it also showed the world the courage and resolve of the Green Beret soldiers. They had proven themselves in the most difficult of circumstances, and their legend grew even stronger. This raid wasn't the only one of its kind. As the war continued, the Commandos participated in numerous other operations, including the infamous Dieppe raid in 1942, where they faced the full force of the German defense. The raid was another disaster, in many ways, but it proved invaluable for the lessons it taught. The Commandos were learning, adapting, and growing stronger with every mission, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The Green Berets' legacy was being forged with every mission they undertook, and it would continue to inspire future generations of Special Forces soldiers. Their bravery, resourcefulness, and relentless drive to complete their objectives would become the cornerstone of Special Forces units around the world. From the SAS to the U.S. Green Berets, who would go on to embody the same principles of elite warfare. Historians still debate whether the cost of these raids was truly worth it in the grand scheme of the war. Some argue that the number of lives lost in operations like Saint Nazaire and Dieppe could have been better spent on larger, more conventional operations. But one thing is clear: these missions demonstrated the power of Special Forces and their ability to change the tide of war through sheer will, tactical brilliance, and the courage to face what others would deem impossible. The night is pitch black, save for the dim glow of distant stars. You and your fellow Commandos are deep behind enemy lines, far from any support. The silence is deafening, but it's the kind of silence that heightens your senses. Every crunch of a twig underfoot, every whisper of wind feels amplified. This is what you've trained for, operating in the shadows, sabotaging key infrastructure, and striking fear into the heart of the enemy. Before we continue, don't forget to like the video if you're enjoying this story, and subscribe if you're interested in the legacy of the Green Berets. And, as always, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's fascinating to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now, back to the mission. The early successes of the British Commandos, such as Operation Chariot, laid the foundation for their growing reputation as the spearhead of Allied Special Forces. But it wasn't just their daring raids that made them so effective. Was their ability to gather intelligence, infiltrate enemy lines, and sabotage key military targets that set them apart. They became experts at living and fighting in hostile environments, often with little more than their wits and whatever supplies they could carry. And it was during these clandestine operations that the true terror of the Commandos began to surface. Historians still argue whether the role of Special Forces in World War II was primarily about direct combat, or if their real value lay in the intelligence they gathered and the psychological warfare they waged. Some believe that the commandos' ability to disrupt enemy operations and create confusion was just as valuable, not more so than the physical damage they caused. Others argue that the damage to German morale caused by the commandos' ability to strike quickly and without warning was one of the most significant outcomes of their operations. Either way, there's no denying that the commandos' tactics would go on to influence the development of special forces units worldwide. One of the defining characteristics of the commando mindset was the ability to adapt to any situation. These men didn't just rely on brute strength or firepower, they used their surroundings, their knowledge of the enemy, and their resourcefulness to get the job done. They were masters of sabotage, able to infiltrate German installations, plant explosives, and disrupt key infrastructure, all while evading detection. Their goal wasn't just to destroy it, was to leave the enemy feeling vulnerable, unsure of where the next blow would come from. The work of the commandos in sabotage and intelligence gathering became so effective that it soon gained the attention of Allied leaders who saw the potential of using specialized units to carry out more covert operations. As the war continued, the commandos were tasked with increasingly complex missions, many of which required them to operate deep within enemy territory. These were missions that no one else was willing to take on, but for the commandos, they were the perfect opportunity to prove their worth. One such mission took place in 1943 in the heart of Nazi-occupied Europe. The British Commandos were tasked with infiltrating a heavily guarded German airfield in Italy. Their mission, to destroy vital aircraft and sabotage enemy supplies, all while operating far from any support. The commandos, equipped with only basic tools and explosives, snuck into the enemy's stronghold under the cover of night, carrying out their mission with stealth and precision. By the time the Germans realized they'd been attacked, the commandos were long gone, having vanished into the night without a trace. This mission highlighted the psychological aspect of the commandos' work. It wasn't just about destruction, it was about creating uncertainty and fear. The Germans didn't know where the commandos would strike next, and that sense of paranoia played a major role in undermining their confidence. The commandos weren't just soldiers, they were invisible nightmares, striking from the shadows and making every German installation feel vulnerable. While the commandos were achieving incredible success in sabotage and intelligence gathering, they were also adapting their methods to survive in some of the most hostile environments in the world. Whether they were operating in the frozen wilderness of Norway, the dense jungles of Burma, or the rocky cliffs of the Mediterranean, the commandos were trained to endure and adapt. They learned how to survive on minimal supplies, to move silently through treacherous terrain, and to fight with whatever they had at hand. One of the most important aspects of their training was survival skills. The commandos were taught to live off the land, to hunt and forage for food, and to find shelter in the harshest conditions. This made them incredibly self-sufficient and allowed them to operate in environments where traditional armies would struggle to survive. It also meant that the commandos were often outnumbered and outgunned, but they relied on their ability to think quickly and use the environment to their advantage. This ability to adapt to any situation became a hallmark of the commandos' success. They weren't just fighting soldiers, they were survivalists, masters of using whatever resources they could find to complete their mission. Whether it was setting traps, using enemy supplies against them, or simply moving undetected through enemy territory, the commandos were able to turn the tide of battle in their favor. Historians still debate the true effectiveness of these tactics. In the overall strategy of World War II, Some argue that the Commandos' specialized operations were a vital part of the Allied victory, while others suggest that they were more of a psychological weapon, disrupting enemy morale and forcing the Germans to stretch their forces thin, regardless of their exact impact. There's no denying that the Commandos played a pivotal role in shaping the modern concept of special forces. Their legacy continues to be felt today, with elite units like the U.S. Green Berets and the British SAS drawing inspiration from the pioneering efforts of the original Commandos. The principles they established, stealth, adaptability, and precision, are still the foundation of special forces training around the world. The Commandos didn't just change the way wars were fought, they changed the way we think about warfare itself. The wind howls through the trees as you crouch low, waiting for the order to move. The sound of distant gunfire grows louder, but it's not your battle. Your mission lies ahead, quiet, deadly, and precise. You've been trained to disappear into the night, leaving nothing behind but the chaos you've caused. This is the life of a commando, always one step ahead, always in the shadows. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that like button. If this story of the Green Berets is resonating with you, subscribe for more, and drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from around the globe. Now, let's continue our journey. The success of the British Commandos in World War II wasn't just about their ability to carry out daring raids or sabotage key military targets. It was about something deeper, something that made them stand apart from regular soldiers: their mindset. The commando mentality wasn't about following orders or adhering to traditional military protocol. It was about resilience, adaptability, and, most importantly, an unyielding determination to succeed, no matter the odds. Historians still debate whether the unique mindset of the Commandos was something that could be taught, or if it was inherent in the men who volunteered for these elite units. Some argue that their mental fortitude was the result of extensive training designed to push them to their physical and emotional limits. Others contend that it was the very nature of the men who volunteered for such dangerous workmen who had already shown an extraordinary level of determination and courage before ever picking up a weapon. Whatever the case, it's clear that the Commandos weren't just trained to fight, they were trained to think differently, to operate outside the box, and to make split-second decisions in life or death situations. This mentality was crucial to their success. The Commandos were often tasked with missions that were, by all accounts, impossible. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and often operating in enemy territory without the luxury of backup. But rather than folding under the pressure, they thrived. They used their environment to their advantage, utilizing guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and stealth to execute their missions with deadly precision. They didn't just fight their enemies, they'd outsmarted them. The most famous example of this mentality can be seen in the way the Commandos carried out operations like the raid on Saint Nazaire. The Germans thought they had secured the Portofidal. It was heavily fortified, but the Commandos didn't just charge in guns blazing. They used their intelligence and ingenuity, sneaking past defenses, setting explosives, and crippling the port before the Germans even realized what was happening. It wasn't about brute force, it was about thinking on their feet and using whatever tools they had at their disposal. The impact of this mentality was profound, not just for the British Commandos, but for the broader military strategy of the Allies. The success of Special Forces operations showed that traditional warfare was no longer enough to win the war. The Commandos demonstrated that small, specialized units could take on missions that larger armies couldn't, striking where the enemy least expected and causing chaos. behind enemy lines. The rise of the Green Bharatha, symbol of the U.S. Army's Special Forces, was inspired by the success of the British Commandos. The U.S. military recognized the need for an elite force that could carry out similar operations, and so the Green Berets were born. They adopted many of the same tactics and principles that had made the British Commandos so effective. Like the original Commandos, the Green Berets were trained in sabotage, intelligence gathering, and guerrilla warfare. But they also went a step further, specializing in training foreign armies and conducting unconventional warfare in a variety of environments. The mental toughness required to be part of these elite units wasn't something that could be easily replicated. It was about more than just physical endurance. It was about being able to face overwhelming odds and still push forward. The Commandos taught the world that success in warfare wasn't just about having the best weapons or the largest army. It was about having the right mindset. And that mindset is what made them so feared by their enemies. Historians still argue over the full extent of the Commandos' psychological impact on the war. Some suggest that their operations had a major effect on German morale, causing fear and uncertainty that undermined the Axis forces' ability to plan and execute their own operations. Others point to the fact that, despite the Commandos' successes, the overall strategic impact of their actions is difficult to measure. Were they a decisive factor in the war? Or were they more of a symbolic force, showing the Nazis that they could be struck anywhere, at any time? Regardless of the ultimate answer, one thing is clear: the Green Beret became a symbol of mental and physical endurance, an emblem of the elite soldiers who were willing to do what others could not or would not. And that legacy continues to this day. Whether it's in the jungles of Vietnam or the deserts of the Middle East, the Green Beret stands for resilience, adaptability, and a relentless pursuit of victory in the most difficult of circumstances. As the war continued, the Commandos proved that their tactics were not just effective, they were revolutionary. They were no longer just an elite fighting force. They had become a model for future generations of soldiers, influencing the development of special forces units in countries around the world. The mentality that had been forged in the heat of battle, the willingness to adapt, to think outside the box, and to strike when least expected became the bedrock of modern special operations. In the end, the Green Beret and the Commandos' legacy wasn't just about the missions they carried out. It was about the mindset they cultivated, one that continues to inspire soldiers and civilians alike. A mindset that says, no matter how insurmountable the challenge, you can always find a way through. The dawn breaks, and you stand atop a ridge, surveying the battlefield below. It's a quiet moment, a brief pause before the storm. You know the mission is far from over. Miles of hostile terrain to navigate. But you've learned that nothing can stop you, not the freezing cold, not the endless days of hunger, not even the fear gnawing at the back of your mind. This is what you signed up for. This is what it means to be a commando. Before we continue, and subscribe for more of this journey through history. And, as always, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's great to know where everyone's listening from. Now, let's dive into the next chapter. The British Commandos, like their American counterparts, who would later adopt the Green Beret, didn't just train to fight, they trained to survive. Their missions often took them into enemy territory, far from any supply lines, where the smallest mistake could mean death. Survival was not a luxury, it was a necessity. And as they became more adept at operating behind enemy lines, the Commandos developed a set of survival skills that would become legendary. One of the most important aspects of They learned how to survive on minimal rations, to make do with whatever they could scavenge or capture from the enemy in any environment. The ability to adapt to the local terrain and weather was a crucial skill that set the commandos. The commandos were taught to withstand extreme stress and exhaustion, to push their bodies beyond their limits, kept the men going when everything else seemed to be falling apart. They knew that they were part of something bigger than themselves, and that gave them the strength to keep moving forward, even in the most dire of circumstances. One of the key elements of commando survival was the ability to think creatively. The men were trained to improvise, to use whatever tools and resources were available to complete their mission. If they needed a bridge, they would build one. If they needed to cross a river, they would fashion a raft. This ability to think on their feet, to make something out of nothing, was one of the reasons the commandos were so effective. They weren't just following orders, they were problem solvers, constantly adapting to new challenges. It wasn't just about surviving in the wilderness, though stealth was their greatest weapon. They were trained to move quietly, to stay out of sight, and to strike when the enemy least expected it. If they were caught, they knew they would be in for a brutal interrogation. So the ability to keep their cool and maintain their cover was essential. While survival was a key part of their training, the commandos were also experts in combat. They were trained in hand-to-hand fighting, as well as in the use of a variety of weapons, from pistols to explosives. But it wasn't just about fighting. It was about using violence strategically. The commandos understood the importance of psychological warfare. They weren't just killing, they were making the enemy feel helpless, making them doubt their own security. The mere presence of the commandos behind enemy lines was enough to shake the Germans, who began to fear the very mention of their name. As the war went on, the commandos became more than just an elite fighting force. They became a symbol of resistance. They showed the world that even against overwhelming odds, a small group of determined men could make a difference. The German forces were constantly on edge, never knowing when or where the next attack would come from. This sense of uncertainty kept them off balance, forcing them to divert resources to counter the commandos' operations. This psychological impact was one of the commandos' greatest strengths. They didn't just fight with weapons, they fought with fear, with the knowledge that their presence was enough to sow confusion and disorder. The enemy could never be sure where the next raid would take place, or which critical infrastructure would be sabotaged. And this uncertainty wore down the Germans, who were forced to spread their forces thin. Ability to disrupt enemy operations through psychological warfare and sabotage was invaluable to the Allies. It's one of the reasons why special forces like the SS, the US Green Berets, and other elite units have continued to use similar tactics to this day. The legacy of the commandos is not just about their physical prowess, it's about the way they used their minds, their creativity. The casualties among the commandos were high. Conditions took a toll on their psyches. Some argue that the long-term psychological effects of special forces operations were not taken seriously enough, while others suggest that the very nature of these operations required a level of mental fortitude that couldn't be fully understood. At the time, in any case, the psychological toll of the commando lifestyle was undeniable. These men didn't just carry weapons, they carried the weight of war, and they did it with remarkable resilience. Story so extraordinary. The legacy of the commandos, and the Green Beret that would come to symbolize their spirit, is one of mental toughness, resilience, and the willingness to fight on, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. These men proved that it wasn't just about surviving. They showed that true warriors thrive under pressure, using everything at their disposal to win the fight. And that mindset would continue to influence the world's most elite forces for generations to come. The air is thick with tension as you crouch down behind the rocky outcrop, scanning the terrain ahead. Your mind races as you analyze every possible outcome of the mission. You can hear the distant hum of enemy movement, but it's not enough to break your focus. Every nerve is on edge, but you know that you're in your element. You've been trained to handle this. Everything you've endured, all the brutal months of preparation, have led to this moment. You're about to show the world that the Commandos can strike anywhere, at any time. Before we jump back into the action, don't forget to like the video if you're feeling the intensity of the Green Beret legacy, and subscribe if you want to keep following this thrilling journey. And of course, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love hearing from viewers across the globe. Now, let's continue. The legacy of the British Commandos wasn't just about their ability to execute raids or sabotage critical infrastructure. It was about the way they adapted to the evolving nature of warfare. As World War II progressed, the enemies the Commandos faced became more formidable, and the challenges they faced more complex. The Commandos had to evolve, refine their tactics, and learn how to face new kinds of combat. It was this ability to constantly innovate and adapt that made them so effective. The Nazis weren't just sitting idly by. They were refining their own methods of warfare, developing new tactics, and fortifying their positions. The Commandos, however, were always one step ahead. They learned how to exploit weaknesses in the enemy's defenses, how to use new technologies to their advantage, and how to overcome the increasing pressure placed on them by the German war machine. One of the most striking aspects of commando operations was their use of deception and misdirection. The Commandos were masters at creating confusion and doubt within the enemy's ranks. They would strike quickly, using surprise and stealth to inflict damage, and then disappear into the shadows before the Germans could react. It wasn't just about inflicting damage, it was about making the enemy question their security, forcing them to spread their forces thin and diluting their power. The Commandos were never just soldiers, they were psychological warriors, creating chaos from within and forcing the Germans to divert resources to fight an invisible enemy. The raid on the French port of Saint-Nazaire, already a famous operation, is a perfect example of how the Commandos used these tactics to their advantage. The German defenses were designed to prevent any attacks on the port's dry dock, but the Commandos managed to outsmart them. The plan involved a decoy mission to draw attention away from the real objective, a clever tactic that exploited the Germans' overconfidence and their belief that they had covered all potential threats. The raid was successful in crippling the port, but the true value of the operation was the psychological blow it dealt to the German forces. They had been caught off guard, their defenses bypassed by a small, highly trained group of soldiers who had used cunning and deception to accomplish their goal. But it wasn't just about using psychological warfare against the enemy, was also about the ability of the Commandos to adapt to new kinds of warfare. As the war progressed, the focus of combat shifted from large, open battles to more irregular, guerrilla-style tactics. This is where the Commandos thrived. They were experts in operating in the shadows, striking from unexpected angles, and using whatever resources they had at their disposal to accomplish their mission. Their training reflected this new reality. The Commandos learned to adapt to any environment, from the freezing cold of the Norwegian mountains to the dense, humid jungles of Burma. They were taught to improvise and use the local terrain to their advantage. Whether it was setting up ambushes, using local materials to build weapons, or sneaking past enemy lines under the cover of night, the commandos were ready for anything. Their versatility made them a force to be reckoned with, and their ability to think outside the box made them unpredictable. One of the key components of their training was the emphasis on teamwork. The commandos were trained to work in small, tight-knit units, often operating independently for long periods of time. They were taught to rely on one another, to make split-second decisions as a team, and to trust their comrades with their lives. This bond was crucial in the high-stakes world of special operations, where success or failure often depended on how well the team worked together under pressure. The commandos were also trained in the use of specialized equipment that allowed them to carry out their operations with even greater efficiency. From explosives to radio equipment, they had everything they needed to complete their missions. But perhaps their most important tool was their training in improvisation. When things went wrong, as they often did in such dangerous operations, the commandos had the skills to adapt, using whatever was at hand to make the best of the situation. As the war progressed, the U.S. military took notice of the British Commandos' success and began to establish their own elite units, drawing heavily on the commando model. The U.S. Army's Green Berets, in particular, adopted many of the same principles that had made the British Commandos so successful. They focused on small, highly trained teams capable of carrying out specialized operations in any environment. From jungles to urban warfare, they too would use psychological warfare, deception, and guerrilla tactics to achieve their goals. Today, the legacy of the Green Berets and the British Commandos lives on in the Special Forces units around the world. The same principles that guided these elite soldiers' adaptability, innovation, and teamwork are still at the core of special operations today. The Green Beret remains a symbol of courage, resilience, and tactical brilliance, and it serves as a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a small, dedicated group of soldiers can change the course of history. Historians still debate the full impact of Special Forces operations during World War II. Were they truly decisive in the outcome of the war, or did they serve more as a morale boost for the Allies? Some argue that their impact was overstated, while others believe that the disruption they caused was crucial in weakening the German war effort. Regardless of the ultimate answer, one thing is clear: the Green Beret and the Commandos' legacy is one that continues to shape modern military strategy, inspiring generations of soldiers to push the boundaries of what is possible. The sky is heavy with the scent of smoke as you crawl along the ground, your body pressed flat against the earth. The enemy is close, but you can't afford to be detected. Every step you take is calculated, every breath controlled. You know that failure isn't an option. Lives depend on your success. This isn't just a mission. It's a test of everything you've become as a commando. Before we jump in, don't forget to give the like button a tap if you're feeling the pulse of this journey, and subscribe for more stories about the Green Berets and their legacy. As always, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always interested in seeing where you're watching from. Now, let's continue. As the war continued and the British Commandos proved their worth, time and again, their success wasn't just about physical skill or the ability to perform high-stakes raids. They had also mastered the art of intelligence gathering. Behind every commando mission was a wealth of information that had been carefully collected, analyzed, and used to plan devastatingly effective operations. The role of intelligence in commando missions became increasingly important as it allowed them to strike with pinpoint accuracy, ensuring maximum impact with minimal risk. Historians still argue over the degree to which intelligence and covert operations shaped the outcome of World War II. Some argue that Special Forces intelligence gathering played an essential role in turning the tide of the war, providing critical information that allowed the Allies to outmaneuver the Axis powers. Others contend that while intelligence was certainly important, the success of the war was ultimately determined by larger strategic moves and conventional warfare. However, one thing is indisputable: the ability to gather and use intelligence made the British Commandos, later the U.S. Green Beret, some of the most effective soldiers on the battlefield. The Commandos were trained in the gathering of human intelligence, often referred to as HUMANT. This involved infiltrating enemy lines, gathering information through covert surveillance, and interacting with locals or prisoners to extract vital intelligence. These operations were often dangerous, requiring commandos to blend seamlessly into the environment and operate without detection. They needed to be adaptable, able to think on their feet and adjust to the unpredictable nature of behind-enemy-lines warfare. One of the most famous intelligence-gathering missions carried out by the Commandos took place in Nazi-occupied France. In 1944, the Allies needed to know the exact strength and positioning of German forces in the lead-up to the D-Day invasion, but they didn't have reliable information about the enemy's fortifications along the coast. The Commandos were tasked with infiltrating the area and gathering as much intel as possible. They relied on their knowledge of guerrilla warfare, navigating the terrain with stealth and precision, and using their training to gather invaluable intelligence that would play a crucial role in the success of the invasion. While some of their operations were focused purely on intelligence, others were centered around sabotage. The goal was not just to gather information, but to actively disrupt the enemy's ability to fight. Whether it was destroying communication lines, sabotaging supply depots, or planting explosives in key military installations, the Commandos were experts at hitting the enemy where it hurt the most. These tactics became a hallmark of their operations, and they were soon feared by the Germans, who found themselves under constant threat of attack. The psychological impact of these operations cannot be overstated. The Commandos' ability to operate in the shadows, striking suddenly and without warning, created a sense of unease within the German ranks. They were never sure where or when the next strike would come. The sheer unpredictability of these operations caused the Germans to stretch their forces thin, dispersing resources across multiple fronts in an effort to guard against the Commandos' ever-present threat. The importance of these operations wasn't just in the immediate destruction they caused. They had a far-reaching effect on the German psyche. The Commandos created a sense of insecurity, undermining German morale and making it difficult for them to maintain the confidence necessary to wage war effectively. The Commandos were a constant reminder that the enemy was always watching, always waiting for the moment to strike. The impact of these covert operations was felt on both sides of the conflict. The British Commandos, through their sabotage and intelligence efforts, played a key role in the eventual Allied victory. But it wasn't just the physical destruction they caused that made them so effective. It was their ability to operate in the shadows, to disrupt the enemy's plans, and to cause fear and uncertainty in the hearts of their foes. This combination of intelligence, sabotage, and psychological warfare gave the Commandos an edge that few conventional armies could match. As the war continued, the role of intelligence and covert operations became even more important. The Germans, recognizing the effectiveness of these tactics, began to invest in their own special forces and intelligence networks, attempting to counter the growing threat posed by Allied commandos. But even as the Germans adapted their strategies, the British and their allies continued to innovate, refining their methods and ensuring that they stayed one step ahead. The importance of intelligence gathering became even more apparent during the planning of Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion. As the Allies prepared to launch their largest amphibious invasion, it was essential that they had the most accurate information possible about German defenses along the coast. The Commandos, with their expertise in intelligence gathering, played a key role in providing this information. They infiltrated the German defenses, gathering vital details that allowed the Allies to adjust their plans and execute the invasion with greater precision. This reliance on intelligence gathering was a hallmark of Special Forces operations during World War II and remains a core component of modern Special Forces units. The Green Berets, born out of the British Commandos, have continued to build on the legacy of intelligence-driven operations, using their expertise in human reconnaissance and sabotage to complete missions around the world. Historians still debate how much of the success of the Allies can be attributed to the intelligence gathered by Special Forces. Some argue that the intelligence gathered by the Commandos was pivotal to the success of the war, while others suggest that its impact was overstated. What is clear, however, is that the Commandos' ability to gather and use intelligence played a key role in shaping the outcome of World War II and laid the groundwork for modern Special Forces operations. The early morning mist clings to your uniform as you move silently through the underbrush. There's a sense of finality in the air, as though you're nearing the end of a long, dangerous journey. You've faced every challenge imaginable, but this mission feels different. The stakes are higher, the enemy more prepared. But as always, you push forward, driven by the same fierce determination that has carried you through countless operations. Before we continue, don't forget to like the video if you're appreciating the relentless spirit of the Green Berets and their legacy, and subscribe for more deep dives into their history. And as always, let me know where you're watching from by sharing your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where you're tuning in from. Now, let's carry on. As the British Commandos continued to make a name for themselves in World War II, their success didn't just stem from their physical prowess or their ability to strike from the shadows. The key to their effectiveness was their adaptability and their capacity to innovate. They understood that the traditional methods of warfare were no longer enough to secure victory against the Germans. The Commandos developed and perfected new tactics that would go on to define the very concept of Special Forces operations. One of the most important innovations of the Commandos was their ability to operate in small, highly skilled teams. Unlike the large-scale military engagements of conventional warfare, where entire battalions would fight in set pieces, the Commandos thrived on being able to carry out operations with minimal resources. They didn't need a massive support network or huge numbers of soldiers to accomplish their missions. Instead, they relied on their training, their ingenuity, and their ability to work together as a close-knit unit. The Commandos were often dropped into enemy territory, far from support, with little more than their equipment and their wits to rely on. They were trained to infiltrate, sabotage, and gather intelligence all while staying undetected. The focus was always on speed and efficiency. The less time spent in enemy territory, the better. They knew that a successful mission didn't require annihilating the enemy, required striking hard and fast, then vanishing before the Germans had a chance to retaliate. This ability to adapt to any environment, to work with minimal support, and to improvise in the face of unexpected challenges became a hallmark of commando operations. Whether it was slipping through the Norwegian fjords or traversing the dense jungles of Burma, the commandos were able to operate with a flexibility that no conventional army could match. But the innovation didn't stop with tactics. The commandos were also pioneers in the development of specialized equipment. They recognized that traditional military gear wasn't always practical for their unique missions. As a result, they began to develop and modify their own equipment to suit their needs. Whether it was lightweight explosives for sabotage or customized weapons for close-quarters combat, the commandos were always looking for ways to enhance their effectiveness in the field. One of the most significant pieces of equipment developed during this time was the commando knife, a versatile tool designed for stealth and close combat. The knife became synonymous with the commando spirit's small, simple, and deadly effective. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of the adaptability and resourcefulness that defined the commandos. As the war dragged on and the Allies began to prepare for their largest operation yet, the importance of the commandos only grew. Their experience in covert operations, sabotage, and intelligence gathering made them the perfect force to assist with the invasion. The success of D-Day would depend not just on overwhelming military force, but on the ability of the commandos to carry out higher-risk missions behind enemy lines, ensuring that the Germans were caught off guard and unable to mount a swift counterattack. In the lead-up to D-Day, the commandos played a critical role in gathering intelligence and sabotaging key German positions. Their expertise in these areas gave the Allies a vital advantage, allowing them to strike with precision and take the Germans by surprise. The fact that the Germans were never able to anticipate where or when the next attack would come from speaks to the effectiveness of the commando method: strike hard, strike fast, and disappear before the enemy can react. Historians still debate the exact impact that the commandos had on the overall success of D-Day. Some argue that their operations were essential to the success of the invasion, as they disrupted German defenses and ensured that key positions were neutralized before the main assault began. Others suggest that the impact of the commandos was overstated and that the success of D-Day was more about the overwhelming strength of the Allied forces. Regardless, the commandos played a critical role in ensuring that D-Day was a success, and their tactics and innovations continued to shape the course of the war. While the British Commandos were making their mark in Europe, the US was watching closely. The success of the British units, particularly the Commandos, served as the blueprint for the creation of the U.S. Army's Green Berets. The U.S. saw the value in having a specialized unit capable of carrying out covert operations, gathering intelligence, and executing sabotage missions deep behind enemy lines. And so, the Green Berets were born, modeled after the British Commandos, but with their own unique focus on unconventional warfare and counterinsurgency operations. The Green Berets, like the commandos before them, would go on to become one of the most respected and feared special forces units in the world. Their training tactics and equipment, many of which were inspired by the British Commandos, set the standard for modern special forces operations. The legacy of the commandos lived on through the Green Berets, and their impact on military strategy continues to this day. Historians still debate the significance of special forces in the overall outcome of World War II. Were they truly the decisive factor in the victory over the Axis powers, or were they simply a complementary force that contributed to the larger Allied strategy? Some argue that the Commandos' ability to disrupt German operations behind the lines was crucial in weakening the enemy's ability to respond to the larger offensives. Others suggest that the real turning point in the war came from the conventional forces, who were able to overwhelm the Axis powers with sheer numbers. But no matter where one lands in that debate, the contribution of the Commandos, both in terms of their physical operations and their innovative tactics, cannot be ignored. The British Commandos were pioneers in every sense of the word. They reshaped the way warfare was conducted, laying the groundwork for the creation of special forces units around the world. And their legacy is one that continues to inspire generations of soldiers, from the U.S. Green Berets to modern-day special forces around the globe. The early morning mist clings to your uniform as you move silently through the underbrush. There's a sense of finality in the air, as though you're nearing the end of a long, dangerous journey. You've faced every challenge imaginable, but this mission feels different. The stakes are higher, the enemy more prepared. But as always, you push forward, driven by the same fierce determination that has carried you through countless operations. Before we continue, don't forget to like the video if you're appreciating the relentless spirit of the Green Berets and their legacy, and subscribe for more deep dives into their history. And as always, let me know where you're watching from by sharing your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where you're tuning in from. Now, let's carry on. As the British Commandos continued to make a name for themselves in World War II, their success didn't just stem from their physical prowess or their ability to strike from the shadows. The key to their effectiveness was their adaptability and their capacity to innovate. They understood that the traditional methods of warfare were no longer enough to secure victory against the Germans. The Commandos developed and perfected new tactics that would go on to define the very concept of special forces operations. One of the most important innovations of the Commandos was their ability to operate in small, highly skilled teams, unlike the large-scale military engagements of conventional warfare, where entire battalions would fight in set pieces. The Commandos thrived on being able to carry out operations with minimal resources. They didn't need a massive support network or huge numbers of soldiers to accomplish their missions. Instead, they relied on their training, their ingenuity, and their ability to work together as a close-knit unit. The Commandos were often dropped into enemy territory, far from support, with little more than their equipment and their wits to rely on. They were trained to infiltrate, sabotage, and gather intelligence, all while staying undetected. The focus was always on speed and efficiency. The less time spent in enemy territory, the better. They knew that a successful mission didn't require annihilating the enemy, required striking hard and fast, then vanishing before the Germans had a chance to retaliate. This ability to adapt to any environment, to work with minimal support, and to improvise in the face of unexpected challenges became a hallmark of commando operations. Whether it was slipping through the Norwegian fjords or traversing the dense jungles of Burma, the Commandos were able to operate with a flexibility that no conventional army could match. But the innovation didn't stop with tactics. The Commandos were also pioneers in the development of specialized equipment. They recognized that traditional military gear wasn't always practical for their unique missions. As a result, they began to develop and modify their own equipment to suit their needs. Whether it was lightweight explosives for sabotage or customized weapons for close-quarters combat, the Commandos were always looking for ways to enhance their effectiveness in the field. One of the most significant pieces of equipment developed during this time was the commando knife, a versatile tool designed for stealth and close combat. The knife became synonymous with the commando spirit's small, simple, and deadly effective. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of the adaptability and resourcefulness that defined the commandos. As the war dragged on and the Allies began to prepare for their largest operation yet, D-Day, the importance of the commandos only grew. Their experience in covert operations, sabotage, and intelligence gathering made them the perfect force to assist with the invasion. The success of DID would depend not just on overwhelming military force, but on the ability of the commandos to carry out higher-risk missions behind enemy lines, ensuring that the Germans were caught off guard and unable to mount a swift counterattack. In the lead-up to D-Day, the commandos played a critical role in gathering intelligence and sabotaging key German positions. Their expertise in these areas gave the Allies a vital advantage, allowing them to strike with precision and take the Germans by surprise. The fact that the Germans were never able to anticipate where or when the next attack would come from speaks to the effectiveness of the commando method: strike hard, strike fast, and disappear before the enemy can react. Historians still debate the exact impact that the commandos had on the overall success of D-Day. Some argue that their operations were essential to the success of the invasion, as they disrupted German defenses and ensured that key positions were neutralized before the main assault began. Others suggest that the impact of the commandos was overstated and that the success of D-Day was more about the overwhelming strength of the Allied forces. Regardless, the commandos played a critical role in ensuring that D-Day was a success, and their tactics and innovations continued to shape the course of the war. While the British Commandos were making their mark in Europe, the US was watching closely. The success of the British units, particularly the Commandos, served as the blueprint for the creation of the US Army's Green Berets. The US saw the value in having a specialized unit capable of carrying out covert operations, gathering intelligence, and executing sabotage missions deep behind enemy lines. And so, the Green Berets were born, modeled after the British Commandos, but with their own unique focus on unconventional warfare and counterinsurgency operations. The Green Berets, like the Commandos before them, would go on to become one of the most respected and feared special forces units in the world. Their training, tactics, and equipment, many of which were inspired by the British Commandos, set the standard for modern special forces operations. The legacy of the Commandos lived on through the Green Berets, and their impact on military strategy continues to this day. Historians still debate the significance of special forces in the overall outcome of World War II. Were they truly the decisive factor in the victory over the Axis powers, or were they simply a complementary force that contributed to the larger Allied strategy? Some argue that the Commandos' ability to disrupt German operations behind the lines was crucial in weakening the enemy's ability to respond to the larger offensives. Others suggest that the real turning point in the war came from the conventional forces, who were able to overwhelm the Axis powers with sheer numbers. But no matter where one lands in that debate, the contribution of the Commandos, both in terms of their physical operations and their innovative tactics, cannot be ignored. The British Commandos were pioneers in every sense of the word. They reshaped the way warfare was conducted, laying the groundwork for the creation of special forces units around the world. And their legacy is one that continues to inspire generations of soldiers, from the US Green Berets to modern-day special forces around the globe. The shadows stretch long as you crouch low behind enemy lines, the weight of your mission pressing heavily on your shoulders. Every decision you make counts, every second matters. You've fought and bled for this moment, and now it's time to strike. The Commandos are the masters of the impossible, and you're no exception. Success or failure will be decided by the precision of your strike. Before we jump deeper into the heart of the story, make sure to give the like button a tap if the legacy of the Green Berets is resonating with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more historical journeys. And, as always, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, let's continue. As the war raged on, and the British Commandos carved their name into history with daring raids and successful sabotage missions, their ability to operate behind enemy lines grew more sophisticated. But it wasn't just their physical skills or their ability to infiltrate and disappear that set them apart. It was their capacity for psychological warfare. The Commandos had learned that fear and uncertainty were powerful weapons, often more effective than bombs and bullets. This was something that would later be perfected by special forces units like the U.S. Green Berets. Historians still argue about the true impact of psychological warfare during World War II. Some suggest that it was a critical factor in the Allied victory, forcing the Axis powers into a constant state of tension and uncertainty. Others believe that while it was a useful tool, the outcome of the war was ultimately determined by traditional military battles. Regardless, there's no doubt that the Commandos were pioneers in using fear as a weapon, a tactic that would be integral to special forces operations in the years to come. One of the most famous examples of psychological warfare carried out by the Commandos was the disruption of German supply lines. The Commandos didn't just destroy infrastructure, they did so in a way that made the Germans question whether any part of their supply chain was safe. Each successful mission was a blow to German morale, not just because of the physical damage inflicted, but because it sent a message. No matter how fortified the position, no matter how secure the supply line, the Commandos could strike anywhere, at any time. This sense of vulnerability was a significant psychological blow to the German forces. The Commandos didn't just strike targets, they made the Germans feel unsafe. They were a constant presence in the back of the enemy's mind, forcing them to worry about their supply chains, their communication lines, and the very foundation of their operations. And the fear of the Commandos was magnified by their unpredictability. The Germans never knew where the next raid would come from or when it would strike, and that uncertainty forced them to spread their forces thinner than they wanted. But it wasn't just about the destruction. The Commandos knew that creating fear was about more than just causing physical damage. It was about psychological dominance. Every raid, every mission, was an opportunity to make the enemy question their security. The Commandos exploited the human element of war, understanding that morale could be as important as firepower. This approach, blending physical destruction with psychological impact, was revolutionary. It changed the way warfare was conducted, and it would become a cornerstone of modern special forces operations. Today, the U.S. Green Berets, among other elite forces, still use psychological tactics to disrupt and undermine their enemies, showing how deeply the Commandos' legacy has influenced modern military strategy. As the war neared its final stages, the British Commandos had not only become an elite fighting force, they had become a symbol of resistance. The fear they instilled in the enemy, combined with their success in sabotage and intelligence gathering, made them an indispensable part of the Allied war effort. But despite the success of their missions, the toll on the Commandos was immense. The constant danger, the grueling missions, and the psychological strain took their toll on the men who carried out these operations. Many commandos returned from missions with scars, both physical and mental, that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Historians still debate whether the psychological toll of these operations was fully understood by the British leadership. Some argue that the commandos' mental health and post-war reintegration were overlooked in the rush to celebrate their success. Others suggest that the very nature of the missions they undertook required an almost superhuman level of resilience, and that this resilience was a defining trait of the commando spirit. Despite the sacrifices made by these men, the commandos' legacy lived on. Their tactics and innovations set the stage for the development of modern special forces. From the U.S. Green Berets to the British SAS, the Green Beret, which would later become synonymous with elite soldiers in the U.S. Army, was inspired by the British Commandos and their methods of psychological warfare, intelligence gathering, and small unit tactics would continue to shape military operations for decades to come. The Commandos' ability to combine physical prowess with mental toughness and to use psychological warfare to their advantage changed the way wars were fought. It proved that sometimes the most effective soldiers aren't the ones with the biggest guns. They're the ones who can outsmart, outlast, and outmaneuver the enemy. The Commandos showed the world that war was not just about might, it was about will, cunning, and the ability to push through the darkest moments. As the years passed, the Green Berets would adopt many of the same principles that made the British Commandos so effective. The U.S. military recognized that modern warfare wasn't just about overwhelming firepower. It was about versatility, adaptability, and the ability to operate in small, specialized units. The legacy of the British Commandos, from their psychological warfare to their focus on small unit tactics, would go on to shape special forces units around the world, from Vietnam to the Middle East, and continue to be the foundation of elite military operations today. Historians still argue about the precise role of special forces in World War II, whether their impact was truly as game-changing as some suggest, or whether their success was more symbolic. But no matter where one lands in that debate, one thing is clear: the Commandos and the Green Berets who followed in their footsteps left an indelible mark on military strategy, forever altering the way wars would be fought. The stillness of the night is pierced only by the faint crunch of gravel beneath your boots as you advance through the enemy's territory. Every corner you turn, every step you take is calculated. The mission is nearly complete, but there's no room for error. The Commandos are not just soldiers, they are ghosts in the shadows, always one step ahead, always thinking 5 moves ahead. Before we continue, don't forget to like the video if you're feeling the weight of the Commandos' legacy and their impact, and subscribe for more stories from history's most elite forces. And, as always, share your location and local time in the comments. It's fascinating to see where you're watching from. Now, let's continue. As the war drew closer to its end, the British Commandos and other special forces units had already reshaped military tactics, proving that small, highly skilled units could achieve what large conventional forces could not. But the question that often looms is this: was the commando strategy effective enough to change the course of the war? Were these elite soldiers, who struck with precision and disappeared into the night, as instrumental in the final victory as the larger Allied campaigns? Historians still argue the extent to which the Commandos truly affected the overall outcome of World War II. Some suggest that their operations, while daring and highly effective, were more about disrupting enemy morale than directly affecting the balance of power. Others believe that these elite soldiers played a pivotal role in weakening the German war effort, forcing them to divert resources to combat an enemy that was always unpredictable, always hidden, and often one step ahead. In either case, there's no denying that the psychological toll of these operations, both on the commandos and on the Germans, was significant. The fear of the commandos and their ability to strike wherever and whenever they chose began to wear on German forces, undermining their confidence and their strategic planning. They couldn't afford to leave any part of their defenses unguarded, and this spread their forces thin, diverting resources from more critical areas. This shift in German strategy became a major part of the commandos' legacy. Their ability to force their enemies to react, to constantly be on edge. In a war that was increasingly decided by logistics, intelligence, and psychological pressure, the commandos' influence could not be underestimated. But as the war ended and the dust settled, many of the commandos who had fought so bravely were left to grapple with the personal toll of their service. These men, who had been pushed to their limits physically and mentally, faced a different kind of battle once they returned home, the battle for normalcy. While they were hailed as heroes, the psychological scars of their experiences were often overlooked. The trauma of living in constant danger, the toll of relentless combat and covert operations, and the sheer strain of their missions left many commandos struggling to reintegrate into civilian life. Historians have noted that despite the admiration for their bravery, the mental health of these soldiers was largely ignored. The British military, like most others at the time, didn't have the resources or understanding to deal with post-traumatic stress, disorder, PTSD on the scale that we recognize today. Many commandos came home to lives that didn't reflect the sacrifices they had made, and the psychological strain they carried with them often went unaddressed. In fact, some scholars argue that the long-term effects of the commandos' brutal training and intense missions were more damaging than previously realized. The commandos had lived through situations that few others could even fathom: months of isolation, constant threat of death, and the mental strain of their operations. They had learned to push through fatigue, fear, and pain, but when they came home, they often didn't know how to deal with the aftermath. Despite this, the legacy of the British Commandos and their role in World War II cannot be overstated. They were pioneers in modern warfare, shaping the tactics and strategies that would go on to influence special forces units for generations. Their ability to infiltrate, sabotage, gather intelligence, and strike fear into the heart of the enemy revolutionized military strategy. Today, the Green Beret stands as a symbol of the spirit and skills first cultivated by these original commandos, embodying the core values of adaptability, resilience, and tactical brilliance. The commandos' influence continued to expand after World War II. Their tactics were adopted by other elite forces, and their strategies were studied and refined. The U.S. Green Berets, in particular, took inspiration from the British Commandos, adopting many of their tactics and methods of unconventional warfare. As the Cold War unfolded, special forces operations became increasingly important, and the legacy of the Commandos, particularly in their ability to operate in small teams and use psychological warfare, was pivotal in shaping modern military operations. Historians often look back on the Commandos with a mixture of awe and curiosity, questioning just how much of a difference they made in the broader sweep of the war. Some argue that they were the unsung heroes, performing small but critical tasks that, while not always in the spotlight, were essential to the Allied war effort. Others suggest that their impact was overstated, a byproduct of their legendary status in the public eye. Regardless of these debates, one thing is clear: the legacy of the Green Beret and its roots in the British Commandos has shaped military strategy and special operations in profound ways. Their approach to warfare, focusing on stealth, intelligence, and psychological warfare, has become the foundation of modern special forces, and their ability to adapt, innovate, and strike fear into the enemy's heart has continued to inspire soldiers. From World War II to the present day, the Green Beret is more than just a symbol. It's a living testament to the incredible spirit, courage, and ingenuity of the Commandos who paved the way for modern special forces. Their legacy continues to influence military operations today, and their story will remain one of the most fascinating chapters in the history of warfare. The ground beneath you is soft with the weight of recent rain, and the faint smell of damp earth fills the air as you advance further into enemy territory. Each step is deliberate, each breath steady. You've come too far, endured too much, to let this mission slip through your fingers. You were trained for this, trained to endure, to adapt, to fight with everything you've got. You're not just a soldier, you're part of something bigger, something that's changed the course of history. Before we dive into the next chapter of the Commandos' legacy, make sure to like the video if you're appreciating the deep dive into their story, and subscribe if you're enjoying the journey through the Green Beret's history. And remember, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always great to see where you're tuning in from around the world. Now, let's continue. As the Commandos' legacy continued to grow, their impact on modern warfare became undeniable. Their tactics, their approach to unconventional warfare, and their ability to disrupt enemy operations behind the lines revolutionized the way armies fought. But what truly set the Commandos apart wasn't just their success in battle, it was their ability to create an enduring legacy, one that would go on to inspire generations of elite soldiers. One of the most lasting legacies of the Commandos was their influence on the development of modern special forces. The Green Berets, for example, were directly influenced by the British Commandos, with their emphasis on small unit tactics, stealth, and unconventional warfare, while the Green Berets would go on to specialize in counterinsurgency and training foreign armies. The core principles of commando operations, precision strikes, adaptability, and psychological warfare remained the same. But the Commandos' legacy wasn't just about tactics and strategy. It was about the mindset they instilled in their soldiers. The commando mentality, the relentless drive, the focus on adaptability, the refusal to back down in the face of impossible odds became a defining characteristic of modern special forces units. It wasn't just about physical endurance or technical expertise. It was about mental toughness, the ability to think on your feet and make decisions in high-pressure situations. This mentality became the foundation for elite forces around the world. The U.S. Green Berets, formed in the 1950s, were one of the first units to adopt this commando ethos. Their training, which emphasized unconventional warfare, psychological operations, and guerrilla tactics, drew directly from the experiences of the British Commandos in World War II. The Green Berets' focus on training foreign soldiers and participating in counterinsurgency operations was a natural extension of the Commandos' pioneering work. The Commandos had shown the world that small, highly trained units could take on much larger, conventional forces, and the Green Berets, inspired by this, would go on to perfect those methods. But the influence of the Commandos didn't stop with the Green Berets. As the world moved into the Cold War and beyond, many countries looked to the success of the Commandos as a model for their own special forces. The British SAS, for example, also traced its roots back to the pioneering work of the Commandos, adopting many of their tactics and strategies. In fact, the SAS went on to become one of the most elite special forces units in the world, carrying on the traditions of the Commandos and setting new standards for modern special operations. As the nature of warfare evolved, so too did the role of special forces. No longer were they just a tool for behind-the-lines sabotage. By the 21st century, special forces units had become key players in counterterrorism, peacekeeping, and even cyber warfare. The legacy of the Commandos lived on, not just in the tactics they pioneered, but in the way they had changed the very definition of what it meant to be a soldier. But even as the Green Berets and other elite forces carried on the work of the Commandos, there was something distinctly different about their operations. The Commandos had fought in a world where the lines between combatants and non-combatants were often blurred. They operated in enemy territory, far from the front lines, often fighting in the shadows. Without the luxury of clear rules of engagement, they had to learn to make tough decisions quickly, to live off the land, and to fight without the resources of a traditional army. In today's military world, special forces continue to carry the lessons of the Commandos with them. However, the nature of warfare has changed. Modern special forces are often called upon to engage in complex operations, working with local populations, engaging in counterinsurgency, or assisting with humanitarian efforts. The scope of their missions has expanded, but the core values, the adaptability, the precision, the ability to operate under extreme conditions, remain unchanged, despite all their successes. The legacy of the Commandos also serves as a reminder of the costs of war. The psychological and physical toll of their operations was immense. Many of the men who fought in these elite units carried their experiences with them long after the war had ended. The impact of war, particularly for those who had lived through the constant stress of behind-lines operations, was often overlooked. The Commandos, like so many other veterans, faced challenges when reintegrating into society after the war. Historians often look back on the lives of these soldiers with a sense of awe and respect, recognizing the sacrifices they made. But they also ask critical questions. Did we do enough to support them after the war? Were the psychological scars of their service given the attention they deserved? While the British military was lauded for creating such a successful fighting force, there is a sense that the psychological toll of Special Forces soldiers wasn't fully understood at the time. Today, we recognize the importance of supporting veterans in all aspects of their reintegration. The psychological resilience that the Commandos and their descendants had to develop during their service has now become a focal point for modern military forces. Training for Special Forces soldiers not only focuses on physical endurance and combat skills, but also on mental health and coping strategies. The legacy of the Commandos, in this regard, has directly shaped how we approach the well-being of soldiers today. The Green Beret stands as a living symbol of all that the Commandos achieved. It represents a unique blend of toughness, intelligence, and adaptability, a mentality that has endured and evolved for over 80 years. The legacy of the Commandos and their daring operations during World War II continues to influence military strategy and special forces training to this day. Historians still debate how much of the Allied victory can be attributed to the contributions of special forces, but the importance of the Commandos in shaping modern military operations is indisputable. From their pioneering role in psychological warfare to their emphasis on adaptability and small unit tactics. The Commandos set the stage for the modern special forces that have become integral to military success around the world. The dawn light breaks through the trees, casting a golden glow on the rugged landscape ahead. You've fought through countless battles, but now, as you look around, there's a sense of quiet that lingers in the air. The mission is over, but the weight of what you've experienced hangs on you. You're no longer just a soldier, you're part of a living legacy. A legacy that will echo through the ages. Before we continue, take a moment to hit that like button if the enduring spirit of the Green Berets and the Commandos has struck a chord with you. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. And as always, feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's incredible to see where you're tuning in from. Now, let's continue. As we've explored throughout this journey, the British Commandos didn't just change the way wars were fought. They redefined what it meant to be an elite soldier. Their legacy has continued to shape military strategy, training, and operations around the world. Small unit tactics, intelligence gathering, and psychological warfare. The Commandos set the standard for modern special forces units, including the Green Berets. But what stands out about the Commandos' legacy is the resilience they demonstrated, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. They were more than just soldiers executing missions. They were survivors, innovators, and pioneers of modern warfare. And this resilience, forged through countless operations in hostile territories, is what continues to inspire soldiers in special forces units around the world. For the men who wore the Green Beret, the weight of the missions they carried out never truly left them. The impact of war, particularly in the form of psychological trauma, is something that is only now beginning to be fully understood and addressed. The Commandos, as the first to forge these dangerous paths, experienced firsthand the strain that such covert warfare took on the mind and spirit. In the decades since, military forces have learned from the lessons of the Commandos. The psychological toll of special forces operations is now acknowledged and supported through better mental health programs and resources for soldiers. Modern special forces training not only emphasizes physical endurance and tactical skills, but also focuses on mental resilience, ensuring that soldiers are better equipped to handle the pressures of their unique and often dangerous missions. And even as the Green Berets and other special forces units carry on the spirit of the Commandos today, their legacy extends beyond just the battlefield. The core principles they established, small unit tactics, adaptability, psychological warfare, and intelligence gathering, are fundamental to how military operations are conducted around the world. These principles are not only applied in combat, but also in training, leadership, and strategy development for elite forces. The enduring influence of the Commandos can also be seen in how modern militaries approach counterinsurgency operations. The lessons they taught about blending in with local populations, gathering intelligence without detection, and striking swiftly and decisively have been applied in conflicts from Vietnam to Afghanistan. Today, Green Berets and similar forces are not just soldiers, they're experts in unconventional warfare, helping to stabilize regions, train allied forces, and fight in environments where traditional tactics are ineffective. What's also remarkable is how the legacy of the Commandos continues to inspire the soldiers who follow in their footsteps. The Green Beret, once a symbol of elite status among the British Commandos, has become synonymous with the highest levels of military excellence. It represents the bravery, ingenuity, and dedication required to be part of an elite force capable of executing the most difficult and dangerous missions. For generations of soldiers, it stands as a reminder of what's possible when you push beyond your limits. Looking back, historians still debate how the Commandos' specialized operations fit into the broader strategy of World War II. Were their operations truly a turning point in the war, or were they more of a complementary force to the larger, conventional military efforts? Some argue that the raids and sabotage missions were essential in weakening the Germans and disrupting their plans, while others believe their role was more symbolic, showing the world that even in the darkest moments of war, there were soldiers willing to take on the impossible. One thing is clear: the Commandos, with their audacious tactics and relentless spirit, reshaped the course of history. Their bravery set the stage for the Green Berets and other special forces, whose missions today continue to echo the same spirit of innovation and adaptability. And while the battlefields may have changed, the essence of what it means to be a Green Beret remains rooted in the lessons learned from the Commandos, the understanding that in war, sometimes it's not about the number of soldiers you have, but the skill, courage, and cunning of the ones you send. As we conclude this journey, we recognize that the legacy of the Green Beret and the Commandos is not just about past victories, it's about an ongoing commitment to excellence, adaptability, and mental fortitude. These principles, forged in the fires of World War II, continue to shape elite forces to this day. And while the names of those who wore the Green Beret may fade with time, forces around the world, historians will continue to debate their exact role in the outcome of the war. But one thing is certain: the Commandos changed the nature of warfare forever, and their legacy lives on in every Green Beret and every Special Forces operator who follows in their footsteps. The world is quieter now, but the air still hums with the tension of recent battle. You've just returned from behind enemy lines, and as you look around, you know that while the mission may be over, the legacy of your comrades and your work will live on. The Green Beret is not just a symbol of a specific time in history, it's a living, breathing testament to the enduring spirit of elite soldiers and their impact on modern warfare. Before we dive into this next part of the story, don't forget to like the video if you're appreciating the incredible impact of the Green Beret and the Commandos, and subscribe for more in-depth stories about the history of Special Forces. And as always, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, let's continue. As we look back at the legacy of the Green Beret and the British Commandos, it's impossible to ignore the lasting impact they've had on the world of modern warfare. What started as a highly specialized unit during World War II has since evolved into the blueprint for today's special forces across the globe. The U.S. Green Berets, British SAS, and other elite military units have taken the principles and tactics pioneered by the Commandos and adapted them to the changing face of warfare. In today's conflicts, warfare is often not about large-scale battles with massive armies clashing in open fields. Instead, it's about small, highly trained units that operate in challenging environments, conduct covert operations, and provide critical intelligence. The Green Berets and their modern counterparts in Special Forces are experts in these types of operations, and much of their success is built upon the foundation laid by the Commandos during World War II. One of the primary ways the Green Berets continue the legacy of the Commandos is through their focus on unconventional warfare. While conventional armies are trained for large-scale confrontations, Special Forces units, like the Green Berets, specialize in smaller, more targeted missions, whether that's training foreign armies, conducting counterinsurgency operations, or gathering intelligence. This approach to warfare allows them to operate in environments where traditional forces struggle, from dense jungles to urban combat zones. Another key aspect of the modern Green Berets' role is their focus on psychological operations, or this was something that the Commandos pioneered during World War II by disrupting the enemy's morale and creating confusion within their ranks. The Commandos were able to weaken their opponent's resolve without needing to engage in direct, destructive combat. Today, the Green Berets still use psychological operations as a central part of their missions, whether it's through disinformation, strategic influence, or supporting local populations in counterinsurgency efforts. But it's not just about tactics. It's also about adaptability. The Commandos were renowned for their ability to operate under a wide range of conditions, from the frozen fjords of Norway to the deserts of North Africa. The Green Berets continue this tradition of adaptability, training for every possible environment, whether it's combat in dense urban settings, counter-terrorism operations in remote villages, or counterinsurgency work in war-torn regions. The Green Berets are equipped to handle it. The modern Green Beret is also a master of unconventional warfare in the digital age. Today's conflicts often extend beyond the physical battlefield, with cyber warfare playing an increasingly significant role. While the Commandos fought with rifles and explosives, the Green Berets today are just as likely to face threats in cyberspace, using their intelligence, training, and adaptability to confront modern adversaries. The core principles of unconventional warfare that the Commandos established, adaptability, stealth, precision, and intelligence gathering, are just as relevant in the digital age as they were during World War II. The influence of the Green Berets extends far beyond the battlefield. As the United States' premier special operations force, they play an integral role in diplomatic and strategic operations, often working alongside local forces to stabilize regions or help countries defend against emerging threats. This combination of military expertise and strategic cooperation is another direct descendant of the commando ethos, which was founded on the ability to adapt and operate in cooperation with local populations in occupied territories. The Green Berets' role in modern warfare is not just a continuation of the past, but an evolution. They've taken the lessons learned from the Commandos' small unit tactics, psychological warfare, intelligence gathering, and adapted them to the new realities of warfare. Whether it's counter-terrorism operations, humanitarian missions, or the strategic training of allied forces, the Green Berets have proven that the principles of unconventional warfare are as relevant today as they were in World War II. Historians still debate the full extent of the impact that special forces, including the Green Berets, have had on contemporary conflicts. Some argue that they're one of the most critical elements in modern military strategy, while others suggest that conventional forces are still the primary drivers of victory. Regardless, the Green Berets' ability to operate with precision, to adapt to changing circumstances, and to utilize both physical and psychological warfare techniques makes them an essential component of the modern military. The Commandos laid the groundwork for the Green Berets and similar elite forces, and their legacy continues to shape the future of warfare. Their ability to work in small, highly trained units, to gather intelligence, and to strike fear into their enemies without ever engaging in large-scale battles has influenced military tactics for over 80 years. And as the world continues to evolve, the Green Beret will undoubtedly continue to play a central role in shaping the future of warfare, just as the Commandos did during World War II. The evening air is thick with the scent of smoke, and the distant echoes of battle are a reminder of the price paid for every victory. You sit in silence, the weight of the day's mission settling in. There is no joy in what you've done, only the understanding that what you've experienced will stay with you forever. The battles fought by the Green Berets and their predecessors in the British Commandos aren't just physical, they take their toll on the mind as well. Before we continue, don't forget to like the video if you're resonating with the stories of the men who wore the Green Beret and the sacrifices they made, and subscribe for more deep dives into their history. And, as always, share your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, let's continue. While the Green Berets and the British Commandos are celebrated for their success on the battlefield, there's an often overlooked aspect of their legacy: the psychological impact that such intense and high-risk operations have on the men who carry them out. Special Forces soldiers, whether Commandos or Green Berets, don't just face physical danger. They also endure extreme psychological stress. Their training, missions, and experiences leave deep emotional scars, many of which last long after the battle has ended. Historians and military experts have long recognized the physical toll of war, but the psychological toll on Special Forces soldiers has often been ignored or underappreciated. The Commandos, who operated in high-stress environments during World War II, had to push their limits both physically and mentally. They were trained to think on their feet, to make life-or-death decisions in split seconds, and to operate in some of the most hostile and isolated conditions imaginable. But what many didn't anticipate was the long-term impact that such extreme conditions would have on their mental health. The psychological strain of being behind enemy lines, with little support and a constant threat of death, was immense. Commandos often faced the trauma of witnessing comrades fall in battle, the pressure of knowing that they were often outnumbered and outgunned, and the emotional burden of carrying out missions that required cold, calculated decisions. The nature of their operations, involving stealth and deception, meant that the psychological impact was often compounded by the sense of isolation. Unlike traditional soldiers, who could rely on the camaraderie of large, cohesive units, Commandos often operated alone or in small teams, separated from the support of a larger force. This isolation could have profound effects on their mental well-being. Historians still debate the extent to which post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, was recognized and treated in soldiers during World War II. While it's now understood that PTSD is a common response to combat trauma during the war, soldiers who exhibited signs of stress or emotional disturbance were often labeled as weak or unreliable. This attitude meant that many Commandos and other Special Forces soldiers returned from the war without the psychological support they so desperately needed. They carried their emotional scars in silence, without the benefit of mental health resources, which often led to long-term struggles with reintegration into civilian life. For the Green Berets, who followed in the footsteps of the Commandos, the psychological toll of their operations was just as significant. While modern military forces are more aware of the mental health challenges faced by soldiers, Special Forces soldiers still face unique pressures. The missions they undertake are often high stakes and high risk, and the need for secrecy and the constant threat of danger create a mental environment that can be difficult to navigate. Like their predecessors, Green Berets operate in small, tight-knit teams, often working in isolation from larger military units. This sense of isolation, combined with the psychological strain of carrying out dangerous and covert missions, can have lasting effects. In recent years, there has been a growing recognition of the importance of mental health support for Special Forces soldiers. The U.S. military, for example, has implemented programs to provide counseling and support for Green Berets and other Special Forces members. These programs acknowledge the unique psychological challenges faced by these soldiers and offer resources to help them cope with the trauma of combat and the stresses of special operations. Despite these advances, however, the mental health challenges of Special Forces soldiers are still often overlooked or misunderstood by the broader public. The toll that war takes on the mind is not just an issue for soldiers in the field, also affects those who return home. The psychological scars of war can manifest in many ways, from difficulty reintegrating into civilian life to struggles with relationships, substance abuse, and depression. For the Commandos and the Green Beret, the transition from combat back to normal life has often been a difficult one. The intensity of their training and operations leaves a permanent mark, and many soldiers find it hard to adjust to life outside the military. Historians have pointed out that the legacy of the Commandos is not just one of physical valor, but of the emotional and psychological resilience required to carry out their operations. The same resilience is a defining trait of the Green Berets, who have proven time and again that the mind is as important as the body in Special Forces operations. While the physical demands of their work are obvious, the mental toughness required to endure the stresses of special operations is equally vital. This psychological resilience is what allows Green Berets and other Special Forces soldiers to push through the hardest of missions, to survive when the odds are stacked against them, and to continue fighting even when the emotional burden of war weighs heavily. It's this same resilience that ensures the legacy of the Commandos and Green Berets will live on, not just as a symbol of military excellence, but as a testament to the human capacity to endure and thrive, even in the darkest of times. Historians still debate how modern military forces can better address the mental health needs of Special Forces soldiers. Some argue that more needs to be done to provide support during and after service, while others believe that the challenges of special operations are inherent to the nature of the job and cannot be fully mitigated. One thing is clear, however. The legacy of the Green Berets and the Commandos is not just about their victories on the battlefield, it's about their ability to face the toughest challenges, both physical and psychological, and come out stronger on the other side. The moon hangs low in the sky, casting a silvery light over the terrain as you move with your team, your Green Beret tight against the weight of the mission. The sounds of distant conflicts echo faintly, but your focus is unwavering. The war may be over, but the legacy of the Green Beret and the Commandos lives on. You're not just a soldier. You're part of an enduring force that has shaped history. Before we wrap up this journey, don't forget to like the video if you found yourself inspired by the story of the Green Berets and the Commandos. And be sure to subscribe for more stories from the annals of military history. And, as always, share where you're tuning in from in the comments. Location and local time are always fun to see. Now, let's reflect on the lasting impact. The Green Beret, symbol of modern-day Special Forces, traces its origins directly to the British Commandos. From their early, daring missions in World War II to the specialized global role of today's Green Berets, the ethos and tactics pioneered by the Commandos have shaped how militaries operate in the 21st century. And as time passes, the influence of these elite units only deepens. The impact of the Green Beret on modern warfare cannot be overstated. In many ways, the role of special forces has evolved, but their core mission remains the same: to adapt, strike decisively, and leave behind an impact that lasts long after the mission is complete. The Green Berets, building on the groundwork laid by their predecessors in the British Commandos, have become indispensable in today's global conflicts, especially in counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and peacekeeping operations. Their effectiveness is built on the same principles of flexibility, stealth, and precision that the Commandos employed decades ago. Special forces today are often the first to arrive in a conflict zone, gathering intelligence, training local forces, and preparing the battlefield for larger military operations. This ability to work in environments where conventional forces struggle has made them a cornerstone of modern military strategy. Perhaps one of the most important ways the Green Berets and the Commandos continue to shape modern warfare is through their approach to unconventional warfare. These soldiers specialize in working with local populations to fight insurgencies, train indigenous forces, and win the hearts and minds of the people. This was a principle first honed by the Commandos during World War II, and it remains a critical tactic for special forces operations around the world. The future of the Green Beret, and special forces in general, will likely continue to focus on the principles established by the Commandos. Modern warfare is constantly evolving, and as new threats emerge, be it cyber warfare, biological threats, or other non-traditional combat environments, the need for highly trained, adaptive soldiers will only increase. The Green Berets will be at the forefront of this evolution, drawing upon the traditions and values of the Commandos to meet the challenges of tomorrow's battlefields. But the legacy of the Green Beret is not only about strategy and tactics, it's also about the spirit of the soldiers who wear it. The Green Beret is a symbol of excellence, bravery, and determination. For every soldier who puts it on, it is a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who wore it before them. It's a symbol of a brotherhood that transcends generations, a commitment to service that goes beyond personal gain, and a legacy that continues to inspire soldiers around the world. As the world continues to change, the role of special forces, the Green Beret will likely become even more essential. The battlefield is no longer confined to traditional fronts. It extends into cyberspace, urban centers, and remote regions of the world. But the Green Beret, with its roots deeply embedded in the legacy of the Commandos, will remain a symbol of adaptability, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to protecting freedom and peace. Historians may debate the significance of special forces in the grand scheme of World War II, but their legacy is undeniable. The innovations in tactics, the bravery in battle, and the psychological resilience demonstrated by the Commandos and later the Green Berets have reshaped military operations and defined the future of modern warfare. And, as we look forward, one thing is clear: the Green Beret will continue to stand as a symbol of excellence and the enduring spirit of special forces. So, as we close this chapter, we remember the Commandos and the Green Berets not just as soldiers, but as pioneers of a new kind of warfare. They've proven time and again that in the most difficult of circumstances, the human spirit can endure, adapt, and overcome. And with that, we say good night. Let the legacy of these brave soldiers inspire us, and may we always remember their sacrifices, their resilience, and their unwavering commitment to doing what others cannot. As we rest, let the stillness of the night wash over us. The stories we've explored tonight remind us of the strength it takes to face the impossible and the courage to stand firm in the face of adversity. The Green Beret, the symbol of an elite force forged through history, will continue to inspire long after the battles are won. In the quiet of the evening, we reflect not only on the missions completed, but also on the men who carried out those missions. Their sacrifices echo through time, reminding us that sometimes the hardest battles are fought within. So, as you drift off into rest, let the stories of these remarkable soldiers, their resilience, and their legacy fill your dreams, and may their example continue to guide us toward strength, adaptability, and courage in our own lives.